Hey YouTubers, Lux here. There's been a lot going on as far as the concept of disarming at least some of the firearms from the American population. Before I go any further, I just want to say that what you're seeing is a fervor, a very well planned and long time in coming effort on the part of what I'll just refer to as a certain group of individuals in our government and amongst ourselves. The majority of these people who are pushing this agenda are people from the realms of academe, people from the realms of the law. These are not people that are faced with any sort of violence or even real life activity on a daily basis. They live in a very insulated type of culture. And, they may genuinely believe that we would be better off if we didn't have any guns. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. I would like to live in a world where we did not really need guns. That would be fabulous. That would be excellent. That would be wonderful. Unfortunately, that's not the real world. That is not the world that we live in. I'm not even going to go into extreme detail about those who like to hunt, those who like to shoot for sport. I personally don't believe in sport hunting. I think it's just a disgusting and barbaric practice. It's certainly still legal to a certain degree. I believe that ranchers have the right to protect their livestock. I think there's a lot of very good reasons for having guns. I'm not going to go into all of them here. But what I did want to say is that there is a country called Switzerland. Many of you already know this. Switzerland's pretty much like us. Highly developed Western society, normal people, not a third world country, and pretty much everybody there is armed. And by armed, I mean they are trained how to use their automatic weapons. They're a nation that is surrounded by other nations. They don't have the luxury that we have here. We're only bordered by 2 countries and a whole bunch of water. But in Europe, that's not the case. They've got countries on every single side. So the concept of a citizen militia is a good concept. And I think it's a great concept for any country. You don't have to rely on somebody else's firepower when you get invaded and be subject to their agenda. If you have an armed citizenry, you have the ability to defend your borders and your nation everywhere. Don't leave it to the police and to the military alone. An armed citizenry is really a good thing. It's absolutely essential for maintaining liberty. But I did want to go over the statistics here from Switzerland. If you already know about this, you can turn this off right now. If you're not familiar with it, then keep listening. Before we get into the statistics, though, I do want to show you something. It's important to know some basic things before you look at statistics. You need to know how many people you're looking at here. We have a population of about 300 million as of July 2011 here in our country. Meanwhile, in Switzerland, we only have about 8 million people as of, it looks like, 2011. So there are substantially more people in the United States than in Switzerland. Very important to know. Whenever you look at statistics being quoted on a website or an article, you want to make sure that there is a citation for those statistics. In this case, you can't really see it here because if I click, I know I'm going to mess up my screencast. But nationmaster.com is a very good website. Tons and tons of statistics, all cited. They tell you which year, who performed the study. Everything is as it should be. People who simply quote statistics and do not cite to a reference, you need to be aware of that. Also, when you're looking at statistics, especially when you're dealing with a country where there are fewer people as opposed to a country which has a substantially larger population, you want to make sure that you distinguish between statistics like this and statistics like this. This tells you the rate per capita, per a certain number of people, whereas this simply cites the number of crimes. Very, very important distinctions to be made. Actually, before we go to the statistics, I just sort of want to make sure everyone understands a few things about Switzerland. Guns are treated very differently there because they don't have a standing army as we do, which means the folks are responsible for protecting themselves. And I would say they've got a really good model going on as far as that goes. Personal responsibility, correct use of the firearm, correct storage, cleaning, all of these things are included in the military training that is compulsory. It's mandatory. And it's really quite interesting. I'm not going to read this to you because everyone knows where Wikipedia is. You can plainly see what we have going on here. If you're not familiar with the nationmaster.com website, it comes highly recommended. There are all kinds of statistics on here, from these kinds of statistics to pretty much everything you want to know. So what I've done is I've come over here. A few of these things I'm not going to click on them because I'm thinking I'm going to mess up my screencast. I just want you to have a look at a couple of these. These are assault victims, as in the percentage of the population. Now, we're 20% more than Switzerland, which is not great, but it's still not a crazy amount. So 1% of the people in Switzerland are assault victims. Bear in mind that not all assault victims report assault. Assault is a nebulous sort of catch-all phrase, so bear that one in mind as well. There's a lot more assaults that go unreported. Police efficiency, they're substantially lower. We're actually first. 67% of the folks in Switzerland don't believe in the efficiency of their police. Well, that might be because they're highly trained. And, you know, when you're highly trained, you tend to evaluate people in your own area of specialty a little more closely. 89% is actually pretty good. Bribes, I don't really want to go into that. Car thefts. There's actually more information. Again, I'm not going to click on this. It doesn't say whether these are violent crimes against persons, car thefts, as in carjackings, or whether these are simply theft of vehicle. But in any event, we have over 1 million car thefts. This was from a 2002 study. Here we don't have as many, but again, you saw the difference in population. Here we have an interesting thing. This is per capita, per 100,000 people. There's definitely quite a bit of drug offenses going on in both places. Here's where it gets kind of interesting. Murders committed by youthful offenders. 17 in the year 2002, I believe this was, for this survey as well. 17 murders committed by youths versus over 8,000 committed. Now, yes, we have more people in our country, but that's a lot of murders committed by young people. And you have to understand, you know, the majority of murders are solved. Whether they're solved properly and correctly or not is another matter. But there's a certain portion, especially in certain jurisdictions, where many murders that are probably committed by youths go unsolved. We're talking about things like gang crime and that sort of thing. Murders with firearms. 68 murders with firearms in Switzerland. Over 9,000 murders with firearms in the United States. It's very, very interesting. Now, when you come down here, you would think, with the number of prisoners that we have, as in people who are not fit to live in society, we've locked up over 2 million people. And actually, there's more than that now. This is an older study. Here we have 5,000 or so prisoners. So, if I'm also not mistaken, we have the largest number of prisoners of any country in the world. So technically, if we're doing our law enforcement and our prosecution and our judicial responsibilities properly, then we should have less crime than anybody because all of our bad guys are locked up. But that's not the case. Okay, for as many prisoners as we have, we still have all kinds of things going on. So we're doing something wrong. That's a fact. Now, here we have prisoners per capita. Very important statistic. For every 100,000 people in Switzerland, there's only 72 of them that are locked up. For every 100,000 people in our great US of A, there are 715 people that are behind bars. Again, that should mean that we have less crime. Because if we have 715 people per 100,000 people who are bad apples and they're locked up, well, that should free the rest of us up to be, safe. And that's not the case. We clearly have way too much crime. There's something very wrong with our system. You can look at some of these other statistics here. Something that's kind of intriguing is total crimes. Total crime victims. Again, not all victims report, so I believe that those statistics are always low in any country, which that shouldn't be. People should report crimes because they're crimes. This is a country with a whole lot of guns. This is a country that wants to ban guns. Now, you would think with a gun in pretty much every home that even though there's fewer people, this number should be huge. The fact that guns create crime is something which dwells in the mind of people who really have some agenda other than making sure our country is safe. We don't need any more task forces or special interest types of think tanks to figure out what's wrong with our country. We have a violence problem in our country. We do not deal properly with violence, nor do we deal properly with mental illness. In addition, I'm going to add youthful offenders in there. I may do some videos at some point about our nation's federal mental institutions and mental health policies, which changed in the 60s and 70s. It used to be that people who were incapable of taking care of themselves and living in society were given a place to have access to medical care, to make sure that they're on their meds, etc. Now, that system was horribly abused, and many people's civil liberties were just terribly violated. There are so many books that I remember reading when I was in college where I couldn't believe that people in the medical profession who were charged with the duty of helping vulnerable persons would mistreat and abuse these people to the point where we had to close our mental institutions to the people who needed them as a result of that. And also people coming back from the Vietnam War who were impaired, etc. There was a large homeless population that began to explode. My generation had daddies and mommies who were exposed to Vietnam. And by the grace of God, my father did not have to experience some of the things that my friends' fathers experienced. Many of my friends grew up with dads who were POWs who were never seen, MIAs, KIAs. Very sad, very, very sad. These guys, a lot of them came back very depressed. There was no such thing really as post-traumatic stress, and they ended up on the streets. They ended up with drug problems. They ended up with AIDS. It was absolutely horrible. And if we had mental institutions in place that could have assisted these people in the proper manner, many of them would not have ended up on the streets. It's really not a good idea to treat veterans in that way. That said, people who have mental illnesses. And I'm not talking about folks who film UFOs who might be a little wacky, people maybe like me. I'm talking about people who have a discernible medical condition, who for some reason are not able to function in society. These people become the burden of the criminal justice system. That's the only way to handle them. They end up homeless, they end up doing strange things, sometimes violent things. Part of the problem is they're unable to maintain a daily routine, which means they forget to take their medication. When that happens, a lot of times families don't know how to deal with these people. I bring up the Kelly Thomas case repeatedly for any number of reasons, and one day I may do some videos on my feelings and professional observations on that scenario. But here was a person who had a very loving family, a family in law enforcement, in fact, and still he ended up on the street. Still he ended up being the victim of police brutality because his behaviors were misconstrued by law enforcement. Now, when you deal with homeless people, a high number of them have some form of mental illness. A normal person does not want to live in the conditions that are afforded by the streets. So the type of people that you deal with on a regular basis are not all there in the traditional way. And some police officers get very, very fed up with having to deal with the same people again and again. And their families can't control them. Now, I'm not saying we should lock everybody up who has a mental disease, but there are certain people who have illnesses who do not belong in jail. All right? They don't belong in jail. Some of these people need to be locked up. They need to be medicated, and they need to never have access to weapons. And shame on the families who know that they have a family member who's potentially dangerous and do not deal with that in an effective manner. Nobody wants to commit a family member, but would you rather see the person gunned down? Okay, some people with mental illness are violent, and they should be locked up. Somebody like Kelly Thomas, that's a whole other very sad situation for any number of reasons. Not sure he should have been locked up, but, some people just want to live on the streets, and there's really nothing you can do. So we do need to reform our federal mental institutions, and we need to make sure that they are humane and that they are properly monitored and that they are used for the correct purpose. When it comes to youthful offenders, one thing I have noticed is that the juvenile justice system, when we're dealing with violent crime, mirrors the adult justice system in some ways that I think are misapplied. Not every youthful offender is a hardened criminal. Some of them, great majority of them, are in bad situations. They're the product of foster care. They have been, around violence their entire life. There are certain areas of our country that are exceptionally violent, and it could be a one-parent family where the mother or the father is out working all the time and the kids are left to raise themselves. That's sort of a problem that we have in this world. That is just the way it is. And a lot of times when you leave children unsupervised and they happen to live in an area where crime is rampant, kids will do what kids will do. Are they all bad kids? No, they're not. Do they all belong locked up in an adult type of facility for what they've done? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. All right? Now, there's a difference between a firearm that is purchased lawfully, maintained in a lawful manner, as in if you have children in the home, the children are unable to gain access to the firearm. Once the children come of age, if you're going to have firearms in your home, the children are properly instructed, hopefully by a certified NRA instructor or similar instructor. There are many gun classes and gun ranges all around the country. It's actually a very good, fun, family type of thing to do. It's a skill that everyone can improve at. It doesn't mean that you're going to start going crazy and shooting up your neighborhood. Okay, that's just not the norm. The people who commit crimes are not the people who lawfully possess and maintain their firearms. They're criminals. Now, if you live in an area where gun crime is a problem, you need to approach your local police department. you need to approach whichever agency oversees your local police department. You know, when I lived in Florida, it was FDLE. Here, it's DPS. Who oversees your local police department? Why is gun crime not under control? The criminals are the ones committing the gun crime. When a child is killed by a firearm, it is either at the hands of a criminal or at the hands of somebody who left their gun in an unattended manner. Now, children and criminals can break into gun safes. They can find your guns. And if somebody breaks into your home, I'm going to bet you one of the things they're going to look for is going to be your guns. All right? They need to be locked up in a safe manner. Leaving them unattended in your vehicle, in a shoebox in your closet, not a good idea. Okay? Because criminals know where to look when they steal things. And kids, when they're left unattended, are going to get into anything. Anything, because they're kids, and that's what they do. So if you don't want your guns to fall into the hands of criminals, then you need to lock them up. If you don't want them to fall into the hands of children who could injure themselves, you need to lock them up. This concept of disarming our country simply on the basis of gun crime takes the responsibility that falls on law enforcement and the judiciary and places it onto the American citizen. Let me repeat that. The concept of disarming our nation on the basis of gun crime takes the responsibility for enforcing the existing gun laws and places the onus upon the average law-abiding, gun-owning citizen. We have laws in place to protect us from gun crime. Why are these laws not being meted out? This is the question. To go into the homes of law-abiding citizens and remove their firearms when those are clearly not the firearms that are causing the problem is beyond misplaced. I'm going to go so far as to say that at some point, hopefully in the not too distant future, this is going to blow over like it has every time before. I can understand the idea behind banning assault rifles. I really can. Because they are scary to a lot of people. And the average person really doesn't have such a need. But the majority, the vast majority of crimes committed with such a weapon are not in the hands or not at the hands of a law-abiding gun owner. It's somebody who should have been locked up in a mental institution and overseen by professional people. It's kids who got a hold of a gun that should have been locked up out of their reach. And it's criminals who came into the possession of the weapon by criminal means. Now, when you look at the statistics here of Switzerland, you need to ask yourself, are these people so much more civilized than we are? Are they somehow smarter when it comes to guns than we are? How is it that they all have weapons in their home, and yet their rate of crime is so much lower than ours? Okay, how is that? Are these people special in some way? Do they have some special Swiss DNA, perhaps, you know, made more potent by eating lots of chocolate? You know, not to be a wise ass about that, but that's what you're really saying when you say, well, Americans need to be disarmed. That's ridiculous. There is absolutely no reason to disarm the American public. We already have gun laws. They need to be enforced against the criminal people who come into possession of guns by unlawful means. And all of this nonsense about creating task forces to protect our children is absolute bunk. If you find yourself wanting to take sides here, you need to do a little bit of research and you need to see who's actually doing the gun crime. Okay? Because me, personally, I'm not doing any gun crime. All right? I may have lots of firearms in my house. I may not. That's my business. Okay? But like anything else in my life, I approach it in a responsible manner. I don't make other people responsible for my problems. I don't take any mental or emotional scenarios that might be going on in my life out on other people. I deal with them. Why? Because I'm a responsible person. And I think the majority of people are responsible. It's actually a small minority of people who are doing the crimes. And in many cases, and this is for all the police out there, you know who the actors are. You know who the bad guys are. And these are the people that need to be disarmed. And if you have a department that is not backing you up, if you have a prosecutor that is not backing you up on your investigations and bringing these trials to fruition, then you need to get vocal. Okay, you need to go outside your department and you need to go to the media. You need to get on the news and you need to say, I'm Sergeant so-and-so and things are not happening correctly in this jurisdiction. Vote these people out. Open your mouth. Okay, you might get investigated by internal affairs, but that's just how it's going to have to be. Because otherwise you're going to be put in a position eventually that you're not going to like. The police need to stand up here and demand that the known criminals who are in possession of guns be taken down. The answer to this is not to put more armed brigades of riot police on the street. Okay, it is lots of fun to get all dressed up and, you know, have a good old time. It really is. I personally always enjoyed that sort of, you know, training exercise anyway. Nobody wants to hurt their fellow citizens. Nobody wants to intimidate their fellow citizens. So to present that as a really great way of maintaining control over the guns in our country is ridiculous. They don't do that in Switzerland, and there's a gun in every home. Okay? Whatever happened to good old-fashioned law enforcement in some of these jurisdictions? Are the police officers so scared to go into some of these neighborhoods? You know who the criminals are. I'm telling you that now. You know who the bad guys are. You know who the people who commit gun crime are. Simple, good old-fashioned law enforcement. Get familiar with your jurisdiction. Talk to the residents. Find out from them who the bad guys are and go get them. Go get the guns. Because again, you're gonna find yourself in a position that you don't like. Do you want to go to work every single day or night in an armored personnel carrier? Okay, all suited up and you know, pumped? No. Because that's going to cause you to become sick. That type of adrenaline that goes through your body when you put on that gear and you walk those streets, in your mind, you're going to start to change. You're going to start to view the average citizen as a potential criminal. And that is very un-American. You're being put in that position by people who don't care about you. Police officers, they don't care about you. You're expendable to them. Look what they're doing to the military. And when I talk to the police officers out there, I know I'm talking to a lot of National Guard members and soldiers who are in that group. Some of the things that you guys have seen and you women have seen out there, do you really want to bring that to your streets? Because that's what's going to happen. If such legislation is passed and the Second Amendment is legislated into the dirt, you're not going to get to just put on your regular patrol outfit and cruise around in your vehicle in some places. You're going to be put in a position that you don't like, so you need to speak out now. If you feel as though the laws on the books are completely adequate and they're not being enforced and you know who the bad guys are, then you need to speak up. As for the rest of the citizens, one more time I'm going to say it. If you find that you need to take sides, if you're so devastated by all of these children being killed and all of the perceived gun crime in our country, then you need to go back. You need to see whose hands were the guns in. Should those guns ever have been in those people's hands? Who should have been responsible for seeing to it that that person never got a hold of a gun? Was a gun sold to the person with a mental illness? Was there not a proper background check performed? Was there a mentally ill person off their meds living in a home with adults who knew damn well that that person had issues and that he was in possession of a firearm? Who should have reported and if needs be Baker acted that individual to protect the rest of us? Because I've always thought that family members and other people, especially people in the mental health field, are liable. Criminally, perhaps, but definitely civilly. If you know you've got someone who's potentially dangerous, who's used weapons in the past, who's not in control of themselves, then you have a duty, not just because you're a doctor or the family member of somebody like this, you have a duty as a citizen to protect the rest of us from that person. Because what's going to happen? There is no federal mental institution to which you can send this person. No, the person is going to end up on the wrong end of a weapon. And that weapon is most likely going to be in the hands of law enforcement. Do you really want to put law enforcement in the position to have to deal with your loved one so we can all watch your loved one be gunned down on YouTube? You know, it's not just the police who are at fault here. Far from it. Police are put in a horrible position. They can investigate whatever they want, and they can do all sorts of paperwork. And then they can watch the prosecutor just throw it out, because that's not what they're going to deal with right now. Go investigate some other kind of crime. We don't need more laws. We need better enforcement of the laws we have, and when that doesn't take place, the people who know that this is a problem need to speak up. And now that you know that it's a problem, see what kind of crime you have in your jurisdiction. Look at the laws that are on the books. Okay, if you see laws on the books that should be handling the problem in your area, then you got a problem. And the problem is not with the law. The Constitution is a very small document, and yet it says everything. It says everything that we need. It's a blueprint for our nation. We don't need anything else. We really don't. We keep thinking if we make more laws and special laws for these people and special allowances for those people and special punishments for people who do this, that somehow we're going to end up with a more just, more controlled society. And the only thing we end up with is fewer liberties, because sooner or later you're going to fall into one of those special categories, either as a lawbreaker or possibly as a victim. You know, we don't need more laws. We don't need task forces to investigate gun violence. These morons just need to look at the statistics. Now that sounds obvious, but again, they've got an agenda. Ask yourself what that is. And what do you want? Personally, I'm ready to go live in Switzerland. Anyway, I have said more than enough on this topic. I hope you guys look into this. I really do. It's very, very, very important. Definitely check out this website for any and all statistical needs, and maybe look into some other countries and how they handle gun violence. See what laws are on their books. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. December 21st, 2012. Everything is going to be just fine in some ways, but it's not just fine in others. All right, guys, keep looking up.